Welcome to Dear Diaspora, a podcast celebrating the African diaspora and the change makers, innovators, and entrepreneurs working to make our world a better one to live in. I'm your host, Ndulwa Kowa. Let's get started. So before I introduce the next guest, don't forget to leave a review, subscribe, and rate on Apple Podcasts. It makes a huge difference, and one key way that it does that is people are more likely to check out an episode or two if they see that there are ratings and if they see that people are actually listening to the content and enjoying the content. And one way to show that you enjoy the content is by leaving a review. So for everyone that's left a review, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if you are listening on any other podcast listening platform, please make sure you follow the podcast so you're notified each Sunday when new episodes come out. And lastly, if you're listening on Spotify, you can actually share the podcast that you listen to on Instagram stories, just like you would a song. So if you're listening to Dear Diaspora on Spotify, you can share that in your Insta stories and I will repost. So of course, tag Dear Diaspora and I will repost, and really appreciate you spreading the word about the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to episode 36 of the show. I hope that you are all doing well wherever you're listening from. This is such a tricky time still, and we're still in the middle of a pandemic. So if you are in a city that is slowly starting to open back up, I hope that you are safe and that you continue to do what you can to social distance if possible, stay at home and work at home if possible, and just do all that you can to continue to keep your family and your friends safe. With that said, I also wanted to just give a quick shout out to all of you. Dear Diaspora recently crossed the 3,000 download mark. That is just so exciting, and I'm so thankful for all of you for tuning in every week, spreading the word about the podcast, sharing your favorite episodes with friends and family. It really makes a difference. Please continue to do that. If you haven't already, leave the show a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts, and follow the podcast if you're listening on Spotify, on SoundCloud, and wherever else you listen to this podcast. For today's episode, I was joined by Asafu Thomas. He is the founder and CEO of Naya Labs. So Naya Labs is a cutting-edge software development company that leverages top developers across the African continent to build web and mobile applications for startups in the US. And outside of Naya Labs, he's part of a team creating Built in Africa, a new platform connecting trailblazers of the African diaspora through the unifying language of tech. So Built in Africa's mission is to build bridges by sharing the stories of developers, designers, and those equipping the human talent with a technical skill set. Y'all, I really enjoyed this conversation and learning more about the incredible work that Asafu is doing through Naya Labs and through Built in Africa. Asafu was born in Liberia and grew up in the US, so he walks us through that during the episode. He also shares more about how he went about building Naya Labs, how he sources talent on the continent and connects them to opportunities, what inspired him and his team to get started with Built in Africa, how we can leverage technology to create more jobs on the continent, and how we can ensure that we don't get left behind in this digital revolution. I really hope that you guys enjoy this conversation. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Asafu Thomas. Asafu, thank you so much for being a guest on Dear Diaspora. I'm so excited to have you.
Absolutely. It's a real pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on to talk about Built in Africa.
Absolutely. Looking forward to learning more about the amazing work that you guys are doing. Let's get started by getting to know you a bit better. Like, where are you from and where did you grow up?
Sure. So I was born in Liberia, and my family, we moved to the U.S. when I was about 5 years old. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts called Worcester. And it was a town that wasn't diverse at all. But fortunately, there was a big Liberian community or big West African community in Worcester. So I really got a chance to grow up I'd say, in my culture. even though I was not on the continent.
Mm. Wow. And so where did you go to school and what did you study?
I went to UMass Amherst, stayed in Massachusetts. Through undergrad, I had no clue what I wanted to do. So I went in studying economics. So I ended up graduating with a degree in economics and finance. I started out my career doing financial advising and quickly took another route into, the building companies and which is what I've been doing for the past 12, 13 years, launching businesses and investing in companies that follow my passion.
Oh, wow. And could you speak a little bit more to that? Like, so what sort of businesses have you been investing in?
Sure. My first company was a digital marketing agency. We worked with financial services companies, just doing a lot of lead generation. It was good from a standpoint of helping me learn business and make money, make a living. However, I quickly realized that for me, it wasn't all about just doing that, just making money. So I was always just very drawn to the African continent and doing something that would make an impact there. And so after that success in that first business, I decided to invest in a software development agency called Naya Labs. And what we do is we outsource work from startups here in the U.S. We outsource their technology work to engineers across the continent. And so we're really building a big network of software engineers on the continent, and I think we're helping businesses here in the U.S. find affordable, quality help on their technical projects.
Wow, that's so awesome. So you guys are doing kind of like what Andela is
Yeah,
doing.
absolutely. Andela's doing it with, I think they work on more enterprise level projects. I
Hmm.
found I really saw there was a need in the space where smaller businesses also have a need. They're also outsourcing a lot, and so we just took that similar model and we're using it for startups and early stage companies.
Wow, that is so awesome. And so how do you get your so how do you like meet the small business owners and how do you kind of present like what you do and then on the other end how do you recruit and find the talent on the continent?
Yeah. So in terms of finding new customers, so we've hosted a number of we call it fireside chats with entrepreneurs in the community in the ecosystem that we're headquartered. We're in the Washington D.C. area, and so we started this monthly entrepreneur series where we bring different founders together. We invite maybe a few investors, or we invite an entrepreneur who's having a level of success, and we just have a conversation with them, and it's really helpful to the attendees. And through that event, we were able to form new relationships with people that eventually became clients of ours. And then, those clients refer us to others. So it's been a lot of that. I think I like to call it through, networking and relationship building, but not just networking from the standpoint of attending events, but really building meaningful relationships with people and then having that develop into business partnerships. Um, from the standpoint of finding engineers, we started out just forming relationships with group founders at Google development groups. There are these groups across the continent, Google meetup groups, let's call them. And yeah, I think they're hosted by a Google representative in the various countries. But there's a huge network of quality engineers in those groups, and we found that getting plugged into those different groups helps us identify quality talent. There's also some tech hubs there on the continent, and also there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are building their own companies who you know their company isn't making money yet, and they're also into they're looking for opportunities to do while they're building their own business. So we've been able to tap into those markets there to identify quality senior level engineers as we built our network.
Wow, that's so amazing. Love that you guys are doing that. And are you mostly working with the software engineers, or do you have other sorts of talent that you provide to these small companies and business owners?
Yeah, so the engineers and designers, UX UI designers, are the type of quality that we source. To just I'm actually don't have never done a lick of coding in my life. I'm more of a from the business side of things. I have a CTO that does a lot of the assessments and works with the team technically, and then we have project managers that are well adept at managing software development projects. So over the years, I think what I've been able to do is identify where there might be opportunities and pull resources and people together to be able to capitalize on those opportunities through the various ventures that I've been a part of. Um, but yes, we focus on designers and engineers for our business. Thank you.
And could you speak a little more to the work that you're doing with Built in Africa? Like, what inspired you guys to get started with it?
Absolutely. So, well, obviously, given my experience in the software development agency that I founded, there was always that interest and passion for technology on the continent because I've just seen the wealth of talent to come out of that in the work that we're doing. But Built in Africa was really inspired by there's a great African proverb that I love called it says until lions learn to write, the tale of the hunt will always be glorified by the hunter. And for me, what that really drives home is that we need to be integral in highlighting our own achievements and telling our own stories, and not just telling them to our own people or on the continent, but sharing those stories around the globe. And just being in that space, me being in that space, I really felt the need, and my partners felt the same, just to really be that kind of that engine or that platform that was highlighting the work that the innovators, the technologists on the ground are doing, just to bring light to the wealth of talent, on the continent and the wealth of technology and innovation. So I like to view Built in Africa as really like my own or our own form of propaganda. you know, yeah,
Wow. Love it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. And obviously, what we're doing is similar or aligns. And I think it's really important for us to be able to tell our own stories, not just for our people, but also for, you know, outsiders looking in, I guess.
right,
Yeah, because the narrative for such a long time has just been of not us of not a thriving African continent or you know, one that's full of like hope and potential. It's kind of
right.
been the opposite. So wow, really appreciate what you guys are doing. And so how did you meet your team members like Nathan and I'm not sure who else is on the team, but how did you guys get together?
So Nathan, Daniel, and Brilliant. So Brilliant and I worked together at Naya Labs. She does a lot of our project management with the team there. But Nathan and I had worked together on various writing projects. He's an amazing writer. He serves as the chief editor for our group. And Daniel I met through Nathan, and Daniel and Nathan have worked on several projects together. And Daniel handles all things creative for our brand and for our company. So he's been doing an amazing job with those things. So we each brought something very unique to the platform that we were building, and I think more importantly, we all really resonated with the idea, and that's where it all starts. We really are all passionate about what Built in Africa is it stands for and what we want it to be moving forward.
Wow, that's so awesome. And for you guys, are there other platforms that you saw out there that you were like, oh, I would love to be doing something similar? Or did you just notice a gap in like the type of content that you guys are going to be putting out?
Yeah, so that it started with noticing the gap. So I've always read as an entrepreneur, investor. I've always read about or read other platforms like the Afrotex, Gravity, or Tech Cable on the continent, and there's a number of others. Just following how they're highlighting different things going on. But we just found that there's a lot of focus on entrepreneurship, which is wonderful. Startups, tech startups, it's great, but we thought there was a void on focusing on the engineers and the designers, the true, like the people kind of diving in and doing the technical work, almost like a Wired for Africa. We didn't really see something like that, and so we just saw the opportunity to really to build it, and that's what we're doing. But yeah, there's definitely, we love what the a lot of other brands are doing, telling our stories. So yeah, it's been great.
Nice. And so, from what you've observed over the years working with like tech talent on the continent, like how powerful is technology like as a tool for development on the continent?
I mean, it's huge. I mean, technology, you just start let's start from the standpoint of creating jobs, which for me I think is the start, when people have opportunities to earn livings in a lot of different ways. I know one of the things technology has done that can really benefit the continent is how it's made the world smaller. Now companies in first world countries are able to hire people from all over the world virtually. And I think especially founders of African descent should be finding ways to, instead of outsourcing to India, China, other markets, there's a lot of talent on the continent that you can hire and employ to really drive home and drive impact, and and serve that. So technology has played a big part, I think, in job creation. It's also, there's a lot happening, I know, around the way people are using money, the way they bank, and just giving access to financing now, because of there being more opportunities to collect data, and for companies to make better decisions in terms of who they who they back, for financing. So I think there's so many great things happening with technology, but I always love to focus on job creation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like that's yeah, when people have money in their pockets, they're
Right.
just like money isn't everything, but it just makes life so much easier. You have just more access to yeah, better healthcare, better living conditions, better food, education, like all those things. So that's yeah, definitely super important. And from the time you've spent like working with the like entrepreneurs and small businesses, like here in the U.S., how many of them, like when you first meet, how many of them are working with, maybe talent or engineers in India or other places? Like, are most of them doing that and not working with talent on the continent?
In my experience, that's what I found. And I'll say if we were just for India, for example, there's a lot of obviously great talented engineers that affordable, and India has been that market, that go-to outsourcing market for a long time. So I get it where a lot of people don't necessarily think of skills on the continent right away. And so that's really what Built in Africa was designed to do. Like, hey, you don't know about this now. We want to create that awareness and say, and just point people in that direction and say, look at all the talent, look at what's happening, look at the innovation there. And so it's been my experience that a lot of people really don't know it. But they do when they do learn about what we're doing at my business. When they learn about what we're doing, they're always very excited, and they're always like, "Oh wow, I had no clue." And maybe it's like not knowing how to find the right people, and so
Hmm.
I think it's that's why it's so powerful. What we're doing with Built in Africa, really shedding the light on that and building that awareness.
Absolutely. And is there any specific data that you share with these companies? Like, you know, the continent has X many software engineers. Like, is it that type of data or?
So we do have charts that talks about. So GitHub, for example, is a kind of like a repository where engineers house code, or where companies will keep the code for their different software applications. And the subscribers to that platform, it shows we have charts that show like the uptick of subscribers to that platform from the continent in various countries throughout the continent. And that's always a great stat to show people how the development or the engineers are growing in various markets. But a lot of times people, I think, resonate with just us being able to show the work that these engineers that have done. So anytime we have a client to start out, and we're talking with them, we like to show the work that's been done in the past, and that always kind of just sets the stage for you know their expectations or their interest in working with us, because they see, okay, this is real professional work. It can get done at quality. It's affordable, and they really resonate with that.
Wow. That's so awesome. And typically are the engineers working with these companies on like an ongoing basis, or is it just like for, more like short-term
Yeah,
projects?
great question. A lot of times it's ongoing. Whenever you build an application for a company, especially if it's a non-technical founder, they're going to want to keep that engineer who already knows their their company or their processes. They know they built the project from the ground up, so they'll stick with them to do maintenance and to build additional features. So it's constantly it's a snowball effect. When we do one project, that turns into an engineer going on the staff, and then that company wants to hire more engineers to do other things on their project. So it definitely, one client sent to can starts to really uh, impact a lot of our network of engineers, because we're able to create a lot of opportunities for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. That's just so cool. And when you are having conversations with the engineers on the continent, what sort of what are they sharing with you? Are they in a position where they have multiple options and they're like, "Oh, let's see what it's going to be like to work with with Naya Labs," or are they like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't had any new projects or anything, so I'm definitely going to work with you guys." Like,
Yeah, so and this is some of the things what Built in Africa, where we're really highlighting, and when we talk to engineers, there I think there's two stages. You see the top level engineers that maybe have experience with the Andelas of the world and so have some access, or they have experience working with international companies, or they're currently working at these big organizations now. They have that experience. We find those entrepreneurs tend to be in high demand, or they're creating their own companies, and so they're doing pretty well. And but then there's another level of engineers that maybe didn't make the cut on a lot of different things, because a lot of some organizations maybe only take the top 1%, but even the top 5% or the top 10% still have great skills, and they're really good. And so just now that there's a lot of there's a big push of moving into ICT, and people are going into cybersecurity, a lot of different areas of engineering. There's a wealth of talent now, and a huge employment pool, a huge talent pool, and so there is, for the if you're not in that, I'll say, top 5% of engineers, we do see there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, we want opportunities because there's not enough of them. And the local companies, while they're starting to hire engineers, the local companies on the ground in Africa, maybe can't pay the same rates, even though the companies here in the U.S. may be paying a lower rate than they would in the States. It's still a lot more than a local company on the ground in Africa would be able to afford. So it's just creating a lot more opportunities where it's needed. Because as I mentioned, there's a huge talent pool being created, and they're going to need a lot more jobs.
Absolutely. Love that you guys are able to create jobs. Um,
I will add, one of the things we've learned, and I was talking to Nathan about this the other day. He referenced that sometimes engineers, let's say in markets like Nigeria, may get a bad rap just because of negative stereotypes that might be out there. So if they're talking to some international companies, sometimes there's stereotypes as to what African engineers can take on, or whether they can be trustworthy and things like that. So some of the things this our platform is about is shedding light on those biases and kind of distilling them, like they don't exist. They're not real issues when it comes to the pool of talent that's there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so important. Um, because even though there have been like a few instances of something like that happen, um, it can really taint like just how people perceive working with people on the continent. So it's great that you guys are addressing that, because it can be quite harmful and dangerous.
Right.
Wow. And so how do you guys manage these projects? Like I know you mentioned you have a project manager on the team. Do you ever have to travel to the continent for
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah. So per, I personally love any chance I get to go across the continent. Actually, before obviously the big pandemic that's going on around the world, before that, I had planned to be, on the continent for about 6 months, and traveling to various locations where we're looking to build out a lot more engineering talent or create more of a network. We're heavy in markets like Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana, and so we wanted to find what's happening in Zambia or Namibia, or in South Africa, or in Ivory Coast, so different markets, just to really get a cross section of engineering talent from across the whole continent. And so um, we do travel for things like that, to attend events and to meet be in circles where where engineers might exist. And so we try to do that as much as possible.
Wow. And how do you, so when you're not on the continent and you're, let's say you're in the States, how do you manage like the time difference, for instance, like, and working with teams that are, their work hours are going to be different from
Yeah,
yours?
great question. Yeah, so the the teams on the ground, a lot of times they'll work on the U.S. time schedule, like whether it's East Coast or whatever time zone. They'll work late if they have to. So it's typically the engineers working on the company's time zone in the company's time zone. So it's never really an issue. A lot of them either are accustomed to starting their work day a little bit later and going until late if they have to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Um, and so, where do you guys see Built in Africa in the next 5 years? Like, what are some of your goals?
Yeah. So yeah, our mission for Built in Africa was really to build a movement, and so for us it's important that that movement is bringing like-minded people together, and I think a real important way to do that is through conferences. So we're in the works. We have a large conference we'd like to do every year, to host every year throughout in a different country across the continent, and that's really just to bring the engineers together, the designers, even the entrepreneurs, and just highlight what's happening, show the great work that's going on, even do some trainings, but even allow people of African descent across the globe to attend and just be part of that whole ecosystem. And so we're working on that, and we'd like to have something like that be kind of a staple that happens on the continent. But there's also we see ourselves doing a lot more, creating a lot more original content. Like I would love to see like short, Vice-like documentaries where we're, in addition to the articles that we're doing, we're actually highlighting these stories through shows and through video, because I think people would really resonate with that type of content as well. So yeah, we got some exciting things in the works. So we are really looking forward to, I'd say, the next 5 years and beyond.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I look forward to that as well.
Yeah.
I would love to attend a conference, one of your conferences on the continent. I think that would be a great opportunity to network and connect with yeah, entrepreneurs and engineers on the continent, and also creating the video content. I think is a great idea, because video is just, I would say it's number one at this point.
Right. When it comes to engagement, that's what people, yeah, that's what people want.
Absolutely. And what would you say excites you the most about Africa's future?
Mm. It it definitely have to be, um, the amount of young people I see moving into the information technology space. I don't know if it's maybe because that space is at the top of my mind because I work in it, but either whether I'm talking to different people on the ground or whether I'm there myself, it just seems like there's a big energy around young people going into data science, software development, or cybersecurity, and I think that's amazing because it's obviously technology and the technical advancements. That's the future, and it's going to make Africa stay, or the different countries across the African continent. It's going to have them stay or become competitive and stay at a competitive level and not get left behind in what's happening across the world with this digital technology revolution. So I'm really excited about that. There seems to be a lot of that happening. There's also a real think like an awakening, like a real consciousness happening among people of African descent across the globe. Like it just feels to me that a lot of people are really starting to resonate with the African continent being our future, and you know, seeing how they can go back and be part of the exciting, things that are happening. I'd really love to see that level of conscious awakening among people across the globe.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely inspiring, and I'm happy to be a part of it. I think I'm meeting a lot of young people that live in the U.S. and the UK and on the continent, and we're all kind of having the same conversations, which is really exciting. So I can't wait to see just what all of our collective efforts will will lead to in the next in like the next few decades. So
Absolutely. And of course, platforms like yours are really pivotal in that. And just creating this type of conversation, I think is really great for people to hear and to get the message out in terms of what's happening and how they can get involved with things.
absolutely, thank you for that. And how can people support the work that you're doing through Built in Africa and through Naya Labs?
Sure. So in terms of Built in Africa, we're always looking for great stories. So if you're an innovator in the tech space yourself, or someone that's doing some pretty amazing things, and we certainly would love to feature them on the platform. So please contact us. We have the contact form on our site. But it's we also want to hear from writers who are focused in tech. In Africa, there's a lot of content that we want to be able to provide. So if you have ideas on stories around tech that should be told, and you're a writer, we'd love to talk with you and get some of those insights in on the platform as well. And just I think when it comes to Naya Labs, it's all about. I would just love to see more businesses um, hiring African engineers and African talent. So, just you'll support that whole Built in Africa, Naya Lab, kind of ethos if you're just like thinking about how you can employ, where possible, how you can employ the talent, on the continent as well.
Absolutely. And how can people connect with you? Are you on like social media, or can people connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, yeah. So definitely, people should follow Built in Africa at builtinafrica.io on Instagram. Um, I'm heavy on LinkedIn. I love that platform. So, and I love to connect with different people on LinkedIn. So Asafu Thomas on LinkedIn. And yeah, we're on Twitter as well with Built in Africa. And so just find all the social media platforms, find ways to connect with us, follow us if you like what we're doing. And we want this again. This is a movement that just is not about the four of us. We'd like to get as many people involved in it as possible. And so yeah, just support us by following us in social media, and reading and listening to the different content that we have on the site.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Asafu, for being a guest on the show. I learned so much, and I look forward to continuing to just watch you guys and what you're going to be doing.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you so much. It means so much that you allowed us to tell our story here, and thank you. And we'll be following the great work you're doing as well. Thank you.
Be sure to learn more about Built in Africa at www.builtinafrica.io. The link to that is in the show notes. You can connect with Asafu on LinkedIn. I'm going to drop that link as well, and you can follow them on Instagram and Twitter at builtinafrica.io. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to share it with one person that you think would enjoy it as well. And also, if you haven't already, be sure to join the Dear Diaspora mailing list. I am launching a monthly newsletter starting next week. So get on the list so you have access to that. I'll be sharing updates on the podcast, some of the articles I'm reading, some helpful business and entrepreneurship resources, and just inspiring content to hopefully keep you inspired and hopeful, especially during this time. Thanks for listening to Dear Diaspora. If you like what you hear, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes. You can find us on Instagram at Dear Diaspora or visit our website at deardiasporashow.com. Thank you, and talk to you next week.